Well, good morning to everyone. It's good to see everyone here. I guess I came in on Tuesday, so maybe this question has already been asked, but I would like to ask for myself, how many do we have here? It's first time here for camp? Oh, wow. That's a lot. Well, just wanted to let you know, Mr. Munson wanted me to announce camp has been extended for one more week. The gate is locked. You can't get out. Oh, yeah! Well, unfortunately, it isn't. Back in the day, way back in the day when my wife went to camp, it was a 3-week camp. I think back in the 70s in Orr, Minnesota. And but 4 weeks? Oh, okay. I'm sorry. All right. But anyways, we appreciate the 2 weeks here and appreciate certainly what God has given us here as a camp and the history here of the last 5 years. It's hard to believe that we've been here 5 years. It just seems like yesterday that the camp was being secured. But again, here we are, and hopefully we'll be back here until Christ returns. So I wanted to start out today, and as Mr. Dixon announced there, the title of my message today, The Uniqueness of Our Identity. Every one of us are unique. You know, we have been created in the image of God, and I'd like to turn there first. If you turn to Genesis, let's go to Genesis chapter 1. We'll start in verse 25. Genesis chapter 1, verse 25. And God made the beasts of the earth according to its kind, the cattle according to its kind, and everything that creeps on the earth according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. So God's physical creation was coming to an end. Now it was time to create the being that would watch over and take care of those of the earth that God had created. Then God said in verse 26, "Let us make man in our image according to our likeness. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." So all of us are created in God's image. The hands, how we look, this is how God looks. This is how God created us to look like Him. But what He didn't do is create all of us alike in the sense of our personalities, in the sense of who we are, what our likes are, what our talents are, as Mr. Munson expressed the other night in the evening reflection of the talents that God gives us. We all are different. And that's a good thing, because I appreciated the special music here today. That's not me, but I'm glad it is. I'm glad that there are those that have those talents, because I enjoy those things. I enjoy the singing. I enjoy the music. But all of us are unique. I don't know. I'd like for you, if you wouldn't mind, just take a quick look at your thumb. Okay? Maybe you've never thought of it. But this fingerprint, this thumbprint right here, is the only thumbprint in all the universe. The thumbprint that God has given to you is your identity physically. Whether we go for some government thing where they require a fingerprint, that fingerprint identifies who we are. And nobody in the entirety of the universe has that but you. Of all the people that God has ever created, let's say if it's been 50 billion since the creation of man until the end of man, this is unique to you. This is your identity. The theme of this year's camp is the same. It is an identity that God gives to us. This is who we are. We are the disciples of Jesus Christ when we love one another. It identifies us as God's people. Again, we have all had different talents, different the uniqueness about it. When you go to the grocery store, there was someone there who produced that food. There's someone there who trucked that food there. There's someone there who is selling it. Everybody gives something to our society. We stand up here, the technology, the talents, again, of our sound people. And by the way, Mr. Ellertson's been here 2 weeks. He now works for us, so he's going to have to step it up a couple gears when he gets back home. Got a lot of work to do for him. But anyways, we all contribute something, and that is our uniqueness. That is what makes us different from everybody else. No two people in all the universe, in all the earth, is alike. We are all different. But I want to start the message out today because as we look through the Bible and we look through how God looks upon humanity and how he wants us to live, again, love for one another. It starts really, of course, with the love of God, but then it starts with the love of each other, that we look out for one another. And the thing that God tells us is that, unfortunately, there will be poor people. There will be those who will be in need. If we go to Deuteronomy 15, we'll start in chapter 15 of Deuteronomy. I'd like to start in verse 7. Deuteronomy 15 and verse 7. If there is among you a poor man of your brethren within any of the gates in your land, which the Lord your God is giving you, you shall not harden your heart, nor shut your hand from your poor brother. But you shall open wide your hand to him and willingly lend him sufficient for his needs, whatever he needs. We'll go down to verse 10. And you shall surely give to him, and your heart shall be grieved when you, it shall not be grieved when you give to him, because for this the Lord your God will bless you in all your works and all to which you put your hand. For the poor, God tells us the poor will never cease from the land. Therefore I command you, saying, you shall open your hand wide to your brother, to your poor, to your needy in your land. I was thinking about this the other day, and I thought, how could there always be poor, or those that might be poor in the land of Israel? But yet, as I am an employer, I see those that have lack of work ethics. I see those who maybe don't want to work. But I also had a nurse to come out, and we were doing a life insurance policy, and she was talking a little bit about herself and some expenses that she was having. And she said, I just haven't managed my money well. She had some money, she was making money, but she just made poor decisions with her money. I felt bad for her. In the car she came in, needed some attention. And so she gets paid by, the company that sends her out to do the blood work and all that. And I got an envelope and I put $100 in there and I gave it to her because she just needed some help. She needed I just wanted to love. I wanted to extend our hand of love, because God does tell us that when we can, we need to help. We need to serve. God gives us also direction in Leviticus 23. I'd like to turn to Leviticus 23 and chapter 22. I might want to go to Leviticus. Let's go to Leviticus 19. I think it describes it better here. Leviticus 19 and verse 9. He says, when you reap the harvest of your land, when you shall not wholly reap the corners of your field, nor shall you gather the gleanings of your harvest. And you shall not glean your vineyard, nor shall you gather every grape of your vineyard. You shall leave them for the poor, the stranger, for I am the eternal, your God. So back in the day, and I understand what God is doing, being a farmer in the corners of our fields, and when we harvest, and there are some times when the crop might fall down, and so there's some out there so that the poor can come in. God doesn't tell us to, gather it up, give it to the poor. He makes them have some skin in the game. They've got to participate. He's going to give it to them, but they've got to go out. They've got to get it. They've got to, it's their life. It's food to survive on. But they've got to be a part of it. But God expects us to help in serving the poor and giving to them to sustain life. Proverbs chapter 19. If we turn to Proverbs chapter 19. And verse 17. Proverbs chapter 9, verse 17. He who has pity on the poor lends to the Lord, and he will pay back what he has given. So God's promise is to us that if you help the poor, you give to them, you have mercy upon them, you love them, strive to do what you can for them. God said, I will repay you that. And I can tell you, God does repay it. These aren't just words. He repays. We experienced it. So He lends. He gives back to us, those who are willing to give to others. Back home there, I had a neighbor. He farmed about 1,000 acres, and it seems like he would always spin his wheels, but go nowhere. And he was a farmer next to us. Like I said, I think he farmed about 1,000 acres. When we would finish up our harvest season, he was still out harvesting. We would take our equipment over there and help him out. Maybe, if not our harvesting equipment, we'd take our semi-trucks over there so that he could fill them up at night so that we could take it to the grain elevator in the morning. For several years, we would help him, and not expecting anything in return. And then when he quit here a few years ago, he did not come and see me about renting his land. He went to another neighbor that didn't even help him. But that's okay. That was okay by me. I would still go there again and do it 1,000 times over to help him out. He had a drinking problem. He had issues personally, and he just couldn't get things done. God expects us where we can and when we can to lend our help and our support to the poor. So as young adults, you may ask, I'm 13 years old, I'm 18 years old, or I'm just getting started in life. I don't have any money. We don't have any land so that they can come and glean. So what can I do? How does this relate to me? And it's just virtues of life that we need to learn now so that when we are in those positions, that we can help and that we can give. There was a time when my wife, when we were first married, that we didn't have much. And her aunt one day did bring us over some groceries. It's a very humbling experience. And, so in order to be able to give, there have to be those receivers also. But we should be and do our best to prepare. But there are things you can do. If this is who we are, the disciples of Jesus Christ, and we are identified by the love that we show. There are so many things that you can do as young adults right here. Too often, we underestimate the power of a touch, a smile, a kind word, a listening ear, or the smallest act of caring, all of which have the potential to help someone in their life. It's not always all about money. It's about how we treat people, how we care about people. We show love, and I want to go to our parents. Here we are, the youth of God's church. How do you treat your parents? Do you listen? They have your best interest at heart. But how do we react when they say, no, we can't do something? There was a sermon that I heard about 35 years ago. I can't tell you the total subject of that sermon, but I can tell you one part of it that just hit home with me, and I've always remembered it. The minister had two sons. He was home one evening, kind of late. The two young boys were playing, and they were horsing around. He thought they might get hurt, so he said, boys, cut it out, sit down, behave. You know how dads are. You know how kids are. I have my two grandsons here. And the boys didn't. They continued. He told them again, you need to sit down, and someone's going to get hurt. So pretty soon, it wasn't long that the boys finally settled down, and the boys, the one boy jumped up in his dad's lap, and he said, Dad, I love you. And the father said to him, son, no, you don't. And the young boy was perplexed. He said, well, yeah, I do, Dad, I love you. He said, no, you don't. Because if you loved me, you would do what I tell you. Because I have your best interest at heart. If you love me, you will listen to me. And so that hit home. If we love our parents, we will listen. My wife and I went to a restaurant one afternoon in our local town. We're a small community, agricultural community of, 3,500, 4,000 people in Knox. As we went in, they set us next to or by 4 older couples. I knew 2 of the couples, and they were in their 80s. So here you have 4 older couples. I assume most of them were in their 80s, but anyways, I just happened to be listening to the conversation. And the conversation of this one, the older man, said, as they were talking about their parents, he said, I wish I would have treated my parents better than what I did. Here he is, 82 plus years old, regretting that he didn't treat mom and dad better than what he did. When I heard that, I stopped immediately eating. It hit me right square between the eyes because I thought, how did I treat my mom and dad as a young, growing up through life? How did I treat my mom and dad? Tears welled up in my eye because I was less than perfect. And there are regrets. Many times we say things. We have smart mouths. We think we know more than mom and dad. There are many times I could have gotten many more spankings than what I did. But I didn't. In Exodus chapter 20, I'd like to go back to the commandment chapter. Exodus chapter 20, verse 12. It says, "Honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long upon the land which the Lord your God is giving you." That is the only commandment where God says that your days may be long. Read the other commandments. The first four commandments is the great commandment, the love of God, first and foremost. But then he gives us the fifth, and that is to love our parents. Because as we learn how to love our parents, hopefully we learn how to love God. Or we should love God so that we can learn how to love our parents. Maybe that's how it should be. But after the first four commandments, he gives us the fifth, to love mom and dad, that your days may be long upon the earth. Only commandment that I see where our days would be long, by listening and obeying mom and dad. John chapter 14. John chapter 14 is another identifying part of who we are. It's our identification. So if we go to John chapter 14. John chapter 14, verse 15. Jesus Christ says, "If you love me, keep my commandments." So part of the love that we show is keeping God's commandments, because God's commandments are love. They are to keep us from harm. Just as the minister told his two sons, I love you, or that when he told them, no, you don't love me because you don't listen. You don't keep my commandments. If we don't keep God's commandments, we can't love God. We have to keep God's commandments. This identifies again who we are. This is a part of our characteristic that God gives to us. I'd like to tell a story. Two students that were in the 8th grade about 25 years ago. One student was severely and mentally handicapped. He was in a chair where he could not take care of himself at all. Could not, as we know, because of the handicap that he had. Could not communicate with the rest of his classmates. But yet he was in school. Schools had to take him and to try to interact as much as they could with this young boy. So here's a young boy, cannot communicate, cannot interact, cannot take care of himself, versus a young boy, again, 8th grade, who is probably the best athlete in his class, who is in the top 5 of his class academically, who is pretty popular. If you're, I hate to say it, but if you're an athlete and you kind of stand out. My nephew, Gunnar Wagner, where's Gunnar? He stood out. But anyways, it came to the end of the 8th grade year. They were having an awards banquet in the gymnasium. So as they were all lining up, the 8th grade class, to go out to the gymnasium, the young man who was the athlete, who was the top 5 in the top 5 academically in his class, grabs the wheelchair of that young man that could not even interact, that could not take care of himself. And he wheeled him right out there. because he wanted him to be a part of the activities that day. I asked that young man, I said, did anybody tell you to do that? Did anybody ask you to do it? And he said, no, Dad. He said, nobody asked me to do it. He said, I wanted to. I wanted to include, because he has been taught that no matter what you have in life, that there are always those that are less fortunate and that we need to take care of them. That you are no better than anybody else, no matter what your name is, no matter what your family has, you're no better than anybody else. We need to take care of those that are less fortunate. Those values were instilled in him by his mother and supported, of course, by his father. These are the types of things that you can do. It's not all about money. It's not all about the physical things. It's about the things that we do in touching humanity, in touching one another, the caring of one another. William Jones is quoted as saying, act as if what you do makes a difference, because it does. Your actions make a difference. My son Josh, last year in February, was playing basketball with our nephew Gunnar, and he just collapsed as both of his knees, the patella tendon that holds the kneecaps in place, snapped. He went down totally incapacitated, could not walk, could not move. So he had to go, of course, to surgery. Went to the doctor. He had to have surgery to have his knees repaired. While we were in surgery at the doctor's office, of course, you know, if you go, whether it's a dentist's office or a doctor's office, it's cold. And as we were in there, there was a lady that was there, sitting there in a chair, kind of in a corner, and she was kind of like this. And she said, you know, I spoke to her. I said, well, how are you? And she said, well, I'm doing good, but I sure am cold. And it just hit me that as we brought Josh up, that we had a couple blankets in the van. And I thought, well, I wonder if she thinks this is going to be weird of me bringing a blanket out to give to her. And it kept nagging at me and kept nagging at me. Finally, I got up, I went out to our van, I got a blanket, I came back in, and I covered her up. And she was so thankful to have that blanket. But the part of that is, too, of the story is that she was an African-American lady, an older lady. And I didn't see color. I don't see color. I see each of us as God's creation. I see all of us as one, as the family of God. And she was ever so grateful. I had to leave. And when she got up to leave later on, she gave the blanket to my wife and said, boy, I sure enjoyed that blanket. It's just an act of kindness. The acts that we can do for one another. The small things that will go a long way, that are so meaningful to people. Better get my phone out because I can get windy sometimes. In James chapter 1, I'd like to turn to James chapter 1 in verse 27. James chapter 1, verse 27. Pure and undefiled religion before God and the Father is this, to visit orphans and widows in their trouble and keep oneself unspotted from the world. It's an identifying part, again, of who we are. It's a characteristic of the love that we share for our humanity, for our brethren, for those who are less fortunate. It's pure, it's undefiled when we do the things that reach out to those who are less fortunate, those who are old, those who are in need, but those who are by themselves. And it's been since I've taken my mom. She wanted to move. She's 89 years old. She wanted to move from the farm to assisted living. She didn't want to live out at the farm anymore to take care of the house. She's getting tired. So we moved her into assisted living. When COVID came along, of course, COVID was there, I guess. We moved her in August of last year. COVID was there. We really couldn't go in and see her. It was a tough time for her to go in. But then when the shots came, or the vaccinations came, she was hesitant to take it, but she decided to because it would give her more freedom if she was vaccinated. Both times she took the vaccination, the shot, she had complications that would send her into the hospital. The first time, it was almost like she had a stroke. And when she was in the hospital, of course, I can't go see her. No one, it's hard to communicate on the telephone. Sometimes you get them, sometimes you don't. But when Mom got better and it was time for discharge, she wasn't quite all there. And it wasn't bad, but she wasn't remembering things. So here she had her COVID shot, but yet she had to go back. When she went back to the assisted living place, she had to be quarantined for 14 days. All by herself in her room. And I just, being in the mental state that she was in, I couldn't do it. I had to bring her home. I called my wife. And it was just a breakdown for almost 30 minutes that I just cried and I cried. I can't do this to my mother. I can't do it. We're bringing her home until she gets better. So we brought her home, and in 3 or 4 days, Mom was better. And she said, "It's okay, I can go back. I'm okay." She wanted to go back, even though she had to quarantine for 14 days again. She wanted to go back because that's where her friends were now, the friends that she would meet. But it's hard. It's hard for parents. It's hard for the older generation for us to stick them someplace and forget about them. God says, no, you don't do that. You have to visit. You have to take care of those. Even though they might be in assisted living, they might be in a nursing home or wherever. Remember them. I remember all that my mom and dad has done for me. I would not be where I am in life if it wasn't for my mom and my dad. And I'm just not going, as we should not, just throw them someplace and act like they don't exist. We have to love. We have to take care of them. This is a part of our characteristic, our uniqueness that God gives to us. There are many things that you can do as young adults. Again, it's not about money. It's not always about the physical things. It's about the compassion that you have for one another. Father's Day just was here not too long, a few days or a week ago or whenever. But anyways, I love it. I've got 3 grandsons and 2 granddaughters. And, Grandpa gets a Father's Day, Grandpa's Day card or whatever. But I get a card, they try to write their names or they scribble, on there. That's their identity, to say, hi, Grandpa or whatever. But that card is so meaningful. I love it. I get the cards out and I look at them every once in a while. I just smile and reminisce a little bit. It's touching. It's very touching. Over the course of my life, I'm an extrovert. I love people. I love talking. I love meeting people. I'll walk down the street in our hometown and maybe not know the people and just say good morning. That's just who I am. That's who I love to be. That interaction with people. It means a lot for you to go by someone in the morning and say good morning, give them a smile. I can guarantee it will have so much meaning and an impact on that person. It means so much. A couple years ago, I stopped in. I was going by, it was about 3 miles from our home farm. I was checking some other fields. And I was going by a neighbor lady's home. She was outside. She's in her 80s. And I hadn't seen her for a while. I was on my John Deere Gator, and I was going, and she was, like I said, she was outside. I said, I got to stop in and see her. So I stopped in, and she was a German lady. Her and her husband migrated after World War II to the United States, through Canada to the United States, and bought a small farm right about 3 miles from us. So we've known, I knew her kids growing up. Her kids went to a different school than what I did. But she was always our neighbor for as long as I can remember as a youth. I stopped in to see Anna. Anna Kronauer was her name. And it just, of all times, it just happened to be her birthday. And I stopped in to say hello, to reminisce a little bit. And the good German lady that she was, she says, come, sit down, have a beer with me. So that's what I did. I had a beer with Anna. We talked. I would leave. But I know that meant so much to her, as we have several widow ladies around that in our farming community that have been dear friends to us over the years. Those things mean so much. We had a neighbor that died. I used to help milk cows when I was a young kid, for our neighbors. There were 2 brothers that had a dairy farm. And they would, pass away, of course, in time. And, the farm, went to the nephew. But the one wife lived, and she moved away from the farm also and went into town so she could be close to the, all the services that she needed. But I would see her in town. There was this old group that went to McDonald's at night. That was their gathering place to have the communications and the interaction. They all enjoyed it. And I'd see her there every once in a while. I mean, I would, if I was there, I'd see her. I didn't go to that meeting because I wasn't that old. I didn't. But anyways, but I would open the door for her, and she remembered all them things. I'd always speak. We'd always talk. We'd always talk about the farm. When Mary died, I got a call from her son. And he said, Todd, Mom wants you to be a pallbearer for her funeral. And as I reflect back, I can say that for a lot of aunts and uncles that I've carried to the grave, just because I spoke to them, just because I loved them, I, would interact with them. And I had that opportunity and that honor to be able to do those. I'm only telling you these stories because these are the things that you can do as young adults to interact. Again, it's not all about money all the time. If we want to help a poor person, we can give in whatever capacity we can, whether it's a blanket, whether it's some food or whatever. These are the virtues of who we are. These are the characteristics of who we are as a people, as God's people. We are setting the trend of a new world tomorrow where this will be the normal. We're not going to see this world anymore. When this world is over, it is over. And we're going to see a new normal of love, of kindness, where people care for one another. And you're at the beginning of that time. Your actions will change that time that is in the very near future. So I hope that you will use your unique characteristics of who you are. Remember, this thumb, this is you. This is your identifying mark. Nobody else has that but you. You are the ones who will show love for one another. The people will recognize you as the ones, as Christ's disciples, as you show love for one another.
For more information, go to our website at cogassembly.org. Copyright 2021, Church of God Assembly. All rights reserved.